Hi, Coach Gary here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about talking to strangers as a recommendation, actually. And it's going to reference a video I did probably a couple of years ago about making friends. And I did that because XJWs have a special challenge when it comes to making friends. Also, it's going to reference a study that I just read about today on one of the XJW Facebook groups. I think it was the Empowered group, and it was basically a study that was conducted with university students as the participants, probably none of which were XJWs. That's not why they were selected, but it recognized two things. One is that as humans, we're gregarious. We are made to interact with other people. We need to interact with other people. And it's actually damaging to our psychological, mental, emotional, as well as physical and even spiritual health to exist in isolation and not be able to talk to other people. At the same time, it was recognized that there are a lot of people that have problems with interacting. It causes them a lot of anxiety. So, why am I talking to XJWs about this topic? Well, it's because there are several reasons why we might have trouble even talking to people, let alone making friends with people. And it all boils down to fear. Fear of what? Well, there are actually several things that we fear that could lead to this issue, but it boils down to the fear of rejection. Fear of rejection by the person. We're not going to be. The conversation's not going to go well. They're not going to accept us. We're going to still be out, stuck in this shunned condition that we're in, with nobody else to talk to. We're not part of anything. It's rejection, and so we fear even trying to be accepted because we think that we're going to be not accepted. We're going to be rejected. The question is, why is that fear there? Well, there are several reasons. A very big one is because we were always taught that the world is lying in the power of the wicked one, Satan himself, most wicked, evil thing ever. So that's pretty bad. So that means that all the people in the world are basically immoral because they don't accept our beliefs. If they don't accept our beliefs, they must be evil, wicked people. Well, to different degrees, but you can't trust one of them, right? They're all immoral when you come down to it. And the fear is not just fear of them doing something to us, but the fear that if we spend too much time with them, we're going to become like them, and which means we're going to become immoral because we were always taught that they're all immoral, which is obviously ridiculous, but that's what we always believed. And we're going to lose our relationship with God. He's not going to like us anymore. We're going to get in trouble. We'll probably be punished or something. So there is that fear. And then there's the fear that we are not used to it. So we don't know what to do. How do we even start? And that's because really, when you think about it, we hardly ever had to make friends. They just were there. If somebody sat next to us at the Kingdom Hall, if we walked to the coat room and passed somebody, they'd be friends with us because we share beliefs in common. Well, that's nice, but that's not a real basis for friendship. Friends are usually, based on something like, common interests or experience or whatever. And so they were just there. We didn't have to work for it. And so we never really learned how to make a friend. And we were always, again, afraid of making friends outside of the organization. So we never got good at it. So we're just not sure how to approach it. And the third fear that is really fear of rejection is we're afraid of failure. We're afraid that we're just not going to do it right. And that if we start a conversation with somebody, we're going to make a fool of ourselves. We're going to feel awkward. We're just going to walk away with our tail between our legs. And that has to do with self-esteem, which there's certain aspects of self-esteem that I'm not going to address all of it. I recommend a post that Rodney made earlier today about self-esteem that touched on a broad perspective of how that self-esteem was sort of spoon-fed to us and how we can break that mold. I'm going to touch on a couple of things that he said, but a lot that I'm not going to because it's out of the scope of this. But that self-esteem, we're just pretty sure that we're going to fail, so we're kind of afraid of ourselves. And so the two reasons that I'm going to touch on that we have low self-esteem is one is that we were so marginalized. The individuals in that organization really don't matter. It's just the collective. It's the organization. It's supposedly about Jehovah, but it's really about the organization and its reputation. It's about the congregation. It's about the elder body. It has nothing to do with you or me. It just has to do with that. So we were marginalized, more so if we were women. They were really marginalized because they can't even measure up to a man, let alone, themselves. I mean, so a lot of us have issues with that. And then the other thing is that we were not really commended for our accomplishments beyond anything that we just did because we had to as a member of the congregation, because we had, we put in field service reports, we went out in field service, we gave talks in the school. Yeah, we were commended for that if we did it right. Of course, the commendation went away if we missed a goal or something, but those are things that are external things. They're not who we are. Those are just things that we did just for show, really, in a way. But we were not commended for any individual efforts, really. So we're not used to all those things, and really blew our self-esteem to pieces. So one of the things that can really help us to kind of resurrect our self-esteem or get self-esteem that we never had before is by talking to strangers. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But first of all, how do we do it? Well, in the study, they were given, I think, 29 different tasks. I don't know, but separate but related tasks, and each task had a something to look for in a potential person to talk to. So creating tasks for ourselves is a good way to approach anything, really. It doesn't have to be the way they set the tasks in the study, but just the task of talking to X number of people. So why not try this? Just concentrate on not so much the big picture of what your overall goal is. Usually it's a good idea to focus on the overall goal. But if your overall goal is to make a friend or just to have a great, great conversation, well, that's nice. But you know what? We can't control it. We can't say that by next month I'm going to have 3 friends, because it might not work, for whatever reason. It's not necessarily even our fault. So that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about tasks of just doing something, just an activity. And so those tasks would be just say by next Friday, I want to talk to X number of people. So let's say by next Friday, I want to talk to 5 people. That's my task for next Friday. Doesn't mean I'm going to talk to the right people. Doesn't mean every one of those conversations is going to go fantastic. But my tasks are to do those 5 those 5 different conversations, and we might be able to do more. And then the second thing about tasks is a dirty word that I never like to use, but I have to because there's no other English word I can think of that makes the point, and that is accountability. Now, you might hate it just as much as me because you know what accountability meant before. It meant we're accountable to God, we're accountable to the organization, we're accountable to the elder body, to the congregation. If we don't do everything just right, we're going to lose God's favor, we're going to be punished, we're going to, on and on and on. That's what accountability means to us. But that's not really the dictionary definition of accountability. I'm just talking about accountable to somebody to verify that we did what we set out to do. In the study I was talking about with the university students, the motivation for doing what they were asked to do was that they got rewards. I don't know what those rewards were. Maybe it's just a pat on the back, or I don't know, a star or something, but they were rewarded for their activity. So that motivated them to do the task. Otherwise they'd be like, yeah, I'd love to, but I don't, I saw somebody and I got scared and I walked away. So I didn't do it. But if we set an accountability for ourselves, nobody sets it for us. We set it for ourselves. And that accountability is to have somebody that we're going to bounce this off. So pick somebody that you trust. Pick somebody that doesn't judge you, is not going to judge you, is not going to criticize you, is not going to make a lot of recommendations that you didn't ask for. Those things are fine. Criticism and recommendations are good in their place if they're done constructively. But for this thing, I'm not talking about that. Don't even just look for somebody that's not going to do that. I would really recommend a life coach, honestly, and because this is what I do all the time as a life coach. But there are so many other life coaches in this group that you can talk to. It doesn't matter who it is, whoever you're comfortable with. But it doesn't have to be a life coach. It could be your father or anybody you trust, to not judge, to just listen and to make sure. And all you're going to do is say, hey, can I ask you a big favor? I set a goal for myself, or kind of a goal, and I want to accomplish several things by the end of next week. And I'm just wondering if I told you what that is, if you could just kind of remember, and then when we get together, maybe next Friday we can meet over a cup of coffee, and you can ask me how am I doing, and I'll tell you, that yeah, I did it, and this one went really well, this one didn't, but I just want to tell you that I did it. So that's what I mean by accountability, is just having somebody to bounce it off, that's going to not criticize you, not judge you, just going to listen and make sure you did what you said you were going to do, and not be concerned with the results. I mean, if they hear that the results are good, hopefully they're going to throw confetti in the air and break open a bottle of champagne for you, but that's not what they're there for. Is just to make sure you did what you said you were going to do. So that's how tasks work, with at least with what I do with people. But how do you pick people? In the study, they they only mentioned two factors, and one of them, just as examples, and one of them was if somebody has interesting shoes. Now, I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't know how it relates to anything, but I can just imagine that maybe it just means, just you see somebody with really cool shoes that you've never seen before, or just really matches their outfit really well. So you just go up to them and say, "Hey, excuse me, but I love your shoes. They are so cool. They look really good on you." Oh, really? Oh, thanks. Well, I just bought them yesterday. I wasn't really. And then, the next thing you know, it's going to be a conversation. It doesn't have to be a scintillating conversation. I'm not going to solve the problems of the world, but it might be quick, or it might be long. You might make a friend. Maybe you'll just be somebody you'll never see again, or maybe you'll see him again next week, and that's it. I don't know. And the other example they used was coffee. They just said coffee. So what does that mean? Same thing. I have no idea. Does that mean that you're in a coffee shop, and you're standing behind somebody and you say, "Hey, by the way, it's the first time I've been here. Is the coffee good here?" And they might say, "Oh yeah, I get coffee here all the time. It's a bit expensive, but it's worth it, believe me." So again, you started a conversation. Maybe you'll even end up sitting together. Maybe not. Doesn't matter. Just the point is that you did the activity. Another way of picking people that I'm going to really recommend. I don't usually give outright recommendations, but this one I feel strongly about. And plus, I'm talking to a whole, everybody watching the video, not an individual. So I am going to give a recommendation, and that is to volunteer for something, anything, something you believe in, just something you think is important and worthwhile. And it doesn't have to be like the top of your list, because maybe the organization you'd like to volunteer for doesn't exist in your town, but let's say you want to volunteer for the local library, because they could always use people, and you don't have to have any special skill set. They'll set you to do whatever they think you can do, and you'll be happy. It's not like you're worried about getting a promotion, because it's volunteer work anyway. So what's the advantage of that? Well, the main advantage of volunteering is because it's a good cause, so you help the good cause. And secondarily, it made you feel better, and an ancillary benefit that should not be the main goal in doing it, but probably will result, is that you'll meet good people. You'll meet people that, like you, believe that this is a good cause. They believe that giving and expecting nothing in return is a very beautiful thing to do. And so they're going to be a giving kind of person that's not necessarily looking for something back all the time. Um, Again, I want to stress that it does not mean that that is the goal, because let's say you work for some place for a couple of weeks or a month and you haven't really made a friend yet. Does that mean that you failed, that you shouldn't have volunteered? No, it's just eventually it'll probably happen. And that's the side benefit, but you already have the satisfaction of knowing that you did something really positive and good for a cause that's important to you. So the object of all of this talking to strangers is really what it's going to do for our self-esteem, for our mental and emotional health, and even our physical health. If you make a friend, that's great, but that's not the main point. The main point is to not let ourselves be stuck in that thinking that this is all I can do. I'm never going to be better than this. Nobody wants to talk to me. I'm shunned by my own parents or my own kids or a whole congregation, and I have no idea. This organization left me without any social skills. I don't know what to do. the whole point of this concept of talking to strangers intervention is to not accept that that is our lot in life. So please don't do that. Whatever you do, please don't accept that your lot in life is just to be as good as you are today and never to get any better, because that's just false. It's a false fact if it's in our head. And the only way to get rid of it is to do things that counter it, that will prove to us that we could do this. So that's what I promise will happen is when you do these things and you have a conversation with somebody, maybe one person will be a wonderful conversation. Four people will be like, whatever, it wasn't exciting. Maybe one of those people will be like, it was terrible. Like I never want to talk to that person again. Doesn't matter. The point is that you did it and you were successful at it. And that's going to really go a long way toward convincing ourselves that we are much better than we were ever led to believe. So, when we were little, we were always taught, don't talk to strangers. Well, no, we're not little anymore. So talk to strangers.